if I were Percy, I'd be like, whoa, where the fuck did you guys get this from? Why do we just have skeleton horses lying around?
That's the real reason that Tyson was up early to see Percy having a bad dream, is he's looking out the window like, who is fucking chanting over there? It's just the Ares cabin summoning demons behind theirs.
Speaking in fucking backwards Latin as fog is rolling across the ground. Yeah.
Yes, horses claw their way out.
Oh, I love that. It's so fucking good.
Hello, and welcome to Notes from the Oracle. I'm Connor, and together with Jack, my co-host from Cabin 6, we're going into uncharted waters as we explore the monstrous mythology of Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Book 2, The Sea of Monsters. Chapter 6, Demon Pigeons Attack. We're getting back to it. We're not there yet, but Demon Pigeons Attack is definitely an improvement.
Yes. Yeah, it's a step up. You know, last chapter was pretty rough, man. it was just not a good time. And since we recorded, I've cleansed my space, I've burned some sage, I did a saltwater enema. I'm clean inside and out. And I went into this chapter with perhaps lowered or tempered expectations and walked away probably for the better because this chapter is fine. It's
Yeah,
okay.
that's very much where I fell. We talked a little bit beforehand. I reread chapter 5 to just make sure. Did I really have that much distaste for it? And I did! Which meant that I, too, went into chapter 6 with some perspective. It wasn't a cleaned out everything, as you apparently did. But in fact, it was the opposite. I went in with the vitriol of 5, and 6 to me, and we'll get there, and I'm sure we can talk about this more at our end of chapter review. It felt very boring, to be honest with you, for having an iconic Labor of Hercules monster. It was okay. It was fine.
It's interesting. I know we've been comparing this book and the timeline of the book and its chapters to book 1, and there are a lot of parallels. It strikes me like this is supposed to be the capture the flag analog,
I was about to say that. I totally agree.
which is a very high bar to
Yeah.
clear. And I think that there's some good stuff in here. I don't know that I felt like it was a complete waste of time, but this chapter is lengthwise pretty long. It's what, 18 pages?
18
Close to
pages,
that?
yeah.
Which I don't know if that is the longest chapter in the book, but I'd have to believe it's up there. And a lot of what is in this chapter, in terms of the bulk of it, I feel like there's a lot of fluff, which is a little frustrating. It's not insulting fluff, but there's other stuff that is happening that I would so love to spend more time on, and it just doesn't really happen. So maybe that's enough preamble, but let's just jump into it.
Yeah. By the way,
So,
I just checked before you do jump in. It
mhm,
is the third longest chapter in the book. The longest one is 22 pages, and the second longest one is 21 pages. So 18 pages clocks in at our third longest chapter of this novel. And looking at those chapter titles and thinking about what happens in those other ones, there's definitely a lot less that happens in this one. Just to put it
mhm.
out there, for the number of pages to amount of important things that happen, it's definitely an off ratio. So, with that being said, please let's dive in.
Yeah. So we start off, Percy is saying that we've skipped a couple of days since the last chapter, since the grand announcement, the infamous chariot races were coming back. And these last few days have been torture. And Percy makes it abundantly clear that that is what Tantalus wanted. Percy is really personally struggling because first he's got Tyson moving into the Poseidon cabin, which one would think as a concept, Percy would actually be kind of a fan of. And we talked a little bit about this. I think it was last chapter, maybe a couple chapters ago, where
Mhm.
Percy constantly laments how alone that cabin feels. But now he has somebody there and he's not super jazzed about it.
Which is a weird dichotomy, if you ask me. I think that's one of the things that made me kinda ho-hum on this chapter, is Percy is gonna continue to be really down and out about that, and it
Mhm.
just feels a little off. I understand where he's coming from, and all of the rest of it, of being frustrated by the way people treat him because of it, makes a lot of sense, and it's totally valid to think, "Hey, he's 13. Of course, his peers effectively just bullying him for this would get him down." But you would think that he would at least be a little bit more excited about Tyson getting to stay in his cabin with him.
Yeah, you mentioned dichotomy, and there's a lot of that in this chapter, but also with Percy's character, where I don't wanna say he's going against his character per se, but there's a lot of conflicting feelings that he has, and none of them stood out to me as being outright wrong, where I wasn't reading anything and said, "Wow, Percy, I have no idea why you felt that way." At least
Mhm.
not that I can remember at this point in time. There's just a lot of turmoil that he's going through, and I do enjoy that aspect of this
Mhm.
chapter. Because we get again, Tyson is so excited. He's 1, excited that, of course, he has shelter, but 2, he's like,
Yeah.
"Percy's my brother?" He's just asking this over and over again like he won the lottery. He can't believe it. And Percy is really trying to distance himself. He's like, "Oh, Tyson, it's not that simple." And Percy internally says, "Well, there's no explaining it to him. He was in heaven." And me, as much as I like the big guy, I couldn't help but feel embarrassed, ashamed. And Percy feels ashamed about feeling ashamed, which again goes into he's like, "Oh, well, you're not my brother. It's not that simple." But it is that simple.
Yeah.
It's it's just that's your half brother, dude. You share a dad. That's where it starts and stops. It doesn't get more complicated than that. Percy is choosing to make it complicated because he refuses to acknowledge it.
Yeah. And with that, I get it. He mentions later on, "Suddenly, I wasn't Percy Jackson, the cool guy who'd retrieved Zeus's lightning bolt last summer. Now I was Percy Jackson, the poor schmuck with the ugly monster for a brother." Which, yeah, but how many other gods have horrible, monstrous children? Sure, Athena doesn't because she's a virgin goddess, but she did create a horrible spider monster that one time. I'm sure Ares has some skeletons in his closet, pun intended, for the chariot we're
Uh-huh.
gonna see
Yeah.
later. But, like, I feel like Poseidon, yes, he does have some of the most monstrous ones, but one, this has gotta be more common than people think it is, where it's just like,
Mhm.
"Yep, and you wouldn't believe it," and I don't have any off the top of my head, but it's like Hermes has a giant tortoise as a child or some shit. Who fucking knows?
Yeah. No, that's incredibly fair, and I mean, the thing that stuck out to me more and again, this doesn't necessarily feel like it's out of character, but does show some of the internal turmoil that Percy's going through. Since when the fuck does Percy Jackson care what these other assholes think about him?
That too.
I almost feel like he's not as focused on the status and prestige. He claims that's the case. He's like, "Oh man, people thought I was cool." Percy has never fucking cared about that. Even earlier in this book, he didn't really care about that. He was sticking by Tyson no matter what. But I think it's more of the underlying issue that Tyson personifies, which is his dad fucking sucks. Like, he has a
Yeah.
sordid past. Obviously, I mean, that's an understatement, but it's now here. Whatever
Yeah.
pride that Percy might have had in being a son of Poseidon, whatever reconciliation, no matter how minor it was after last book, is once again kind of thrown out the window, and he's saying, "Wow, my dad is pretty ass." Because it's not just, "Oh, my dad sired a monster with one eye." It's more just that Poseidon is not faithful. He is arbitrary and lustful like every other god out there. And he is known for creating abominations that he doesn't claim. They're only tied to him based on the mistake he made.
Yeah. And as Percy and Annabeth are talking and building their chariot, they continue to talk about this. And I also wonder how much of Percy's opinions are also colored by the fact that Tyson is putting a wedge between him and Annabeth. And I I thought that some of the things she was saying make a lot of sense from the perspective of what we will learn about her character and her experiences with Cyclopes in the past.
Mhm.
But she's also a bright character, so when she says things like, "Cyclops are some of the most deceitful, treacherous," Percy cuts her off and says, "He is not." But she's going on like, "He's awful. He's one of the worst monsters there is," and I feel like Annabeth should be well educated enough to know that there is a big difference between the type of Cyclops that is Polyphemus and the type of Cyclops that forged the Master Bolt, the other items for the big 3, the Trident, the Helm of Darkness, and I would hope be able to recognize that Tyson, we're gonna learn, is spending a lot of time with the Hephaestus cabin. He's probably much more akin to one of these divine Cyclops that works and benefits the gods than some big brutish monster like the one that tries to kill Odysseus and his men.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I view it as this is a case of somebody trying to intellectualize their inherent biases and bigotry. And Annabeth, who is a very compassionate and bright person, is not immune to having those biases,
Mhm.
especially based on what she's been through. So rather than her compartmentalizing and confronting that part of herself, that part that is really it's based in fear, right? She is afraid and it manifests as anger and hatred. She is being childish because she is still a kid
Yep.
and just painting in broad strokes and saying, "Well, I know I have all of this empiric evidence and all of this anecdotal evidence that if you have one eye and you're a cyclops, that means that you eat sheep and you kill men and you eat the men and they're awful and deceitful and treacherous and everything else," she said. And that's about as far as she thinks about it because trying to unpack that is triggering. Now, that is not a great excuse. Bigotry has no place in anybody, even if it is manifestation of fear or trauma. That is something that you to face. But again, having zero memory of this, I would have to think that she will go through that character development to confront that. And I, Jack, am curious to see how she does that. A
Yeah.
character that is usually very smart and usually, when written well, the voice of reason, having to see that she is being unreasonable with this.
Mhm. And I think you do make a very good point that this is setting up for her arc for this novel. And I don't mind that. We're early enough, and as we kinda talked about before last chapter, a lot of the stuff that got us to Camp Half-Blood in this book was really exciting, and it had a lot of action, and it had a fast pulse to it. It moved you along in a clip, and I think what it didn't have was a lot of those setting details for what we're going to build upon
Mm,
outside of just Percy. We got a lot
mhm.
of Percy's internal, we got that struggle of like, "Oh, he's out of practice," that sort of thing, which is good, but we didn't get to see as much of our supporting cast and what arcs they're gonna be on, so I do feel like you're right in identifying that that's a lot of what this probably is for Annabeth.
Yeah. And I mean, throughout this encounter that Percy is having with Annabeth, this is where we get some more of that dichotomy that Percy is starts off by lamenting, "Tyson is not my brother. I hate that people keep saying that. It's embarrassing." And Annabeth is, like, agreeing. She's like,
Yep.
"Yeah, dude, that sucks." And then Percy gets defensive again and starts lashing out and says, "He is not a deceitful, treacherous monster." And he asks, "What have you got against Cyclops anyways?" And it clearly strikes a nerve, but he goes in back to defending Tyson. Says, "You're
Mhm.
treating him like he's this horrible thing. But Percy, you've been doing that, this entire chapter. That's you can't have it both ways."
Yeah.
And I guess there could be the argument, it's one of those things where it's like, only I can make fun of my family. If anybody else does it, they're fucking dead on arrival. But I don't know that we've gotten there yet because there's a simple refusal to acknowledge it from Percy to where again, it's like he doesn't know where to settle on the matter.
Mhm.
Again, I don't think this is exactly super deep analysis, but I do find it interesting. It's a neat way to build upon Percy's identity crisis that differs from last book.
Mhm. And I also understand that it's for this longer chapter, because it's longer, they're trying to set up like an internal arc within it. And so driving this wedge between Annabeth and Percy will make it so that when they resolve it by the end of the chapter, it feels a little bit earned, whether or not it actually executes that way. But it does also mean that as they're designing their chariot, Annabeth and Percy get to the point where Annabeth throws down the pencil and is like, fine, maybe you should go design a chariot with him. And Percy says, maybe I should. And we're reminded that they're 13.
Yes. Yep. Yep. They do the classic "fine, fine," and then
Yep.
storm off in different directions. And we don't know how Annabeth feels, but we do know Percy says that he was left feeling even worse than before.
Which is good acknowledgement. I like that, at least from a character perspective, Percy recognizes that he doesn't want to be upset with Annabeth
Of course.
because they are friends. And so that makes sense. But it does at least give us some room to start exploring some of the side characters. So we get to
Yes.
learn a little bit about Selena Beauregard, who he says is one of the nicer girls from Aphrodite's cabin and is giving Percy one of his first riding lessons on a Pegasus, which is, that's fun. Percy
Yeah.
explains that being the son of the sea god, he never liked going into the air, but something about being on a winged horse felt different. It didn't make him nearly as nervous as being in an airplane. And then he spews some straight up lies. He says, maybe that was because my dad had created horses out of sea foam. He didn't do that, Percy. That's not how that happened. Good try, though.
Well, the details aside, he does have a telepathic link with them. He can communicate with them with his mind.
That is
So
pretty cool.
that's neat. We learned that with the zebra last book,
We're
just building off of
slowly
that.
Exactly, we're slowly expanding the list of equestrian creatures that Percy can talk to.
I do like how they make a very specific distinction. There are Pegasi, lowercase p, which are just winged horses, and then there's capital P Pegasus, which is his own special immortal winged horse. And he's out there wandering free in the skies, but he's had a lot of kids. He's gotten to fucking, and those kids are just regular ass horses with wings.
I did also enjoy that it specifically pointed out that none of the other ones were quite so fast or heroic.
Yep.
Damn, way to call out an entire species, Percy.
I mean, he didn't say they were bad. It's just Pegasus is in a league of his own.
That's true, and also Selena explained that, so she's the Pegasus.
Mhm. Pegasus. That is something K Aphrodite camper would be. You're like, "Yeah, it's not as good as that one, but they're alright."
I could tolerate.
Mhm. Percy is trying to introduce Tyson to the Pegasi. Tyson keeps referring to them as chicken ponies. I thought that was adorable.
That's adorable,
But
yeah.
yeah, but the Pegasi are really skittish whenever Tyson gets close. And Percy, despite his best attempts, is just not able to sedate them right now. And it makes Tyson really sad, and it makes Tyson cry because he doesn't want to hurt them. But he is very big, and he is a monster who is specifically from a race that is known to eat horses.
Yeah. Not a great look for him, but it also does kind of, in a weird way, because Tyson is a more monstrous child of Poseidon, it does start to establish that different children of the gods will inherit different aspects of that god's power. So Percy can talk telepathically to horses, but Tyson, being a child of Poseidon and a Cyclops, does not inherit that ability. It doesn't
Mhm.
come up so much in this series, but that does end up being kind of an important detail once we get to Heroes of Olympus and we start to see the descendants of Poseidon from Frank's line, or the differences between even just like Thalia and Jason in the way that their powers manifest being children of Zeus versus Jupiter.
Mhm.
So that's fun. We then get to move on to discuss Beckendorf. This is
Yeah.
not a huge chapter for Beckendorf, but we're going to get a couple of mentions from him across here where it's being said that he is one of the only people at camp. No, the only person at camp who had no problem with Tyson. Tyson apparently has a natural talent for metalworking and crafting, and Beckendorf says Tyson will be crafting magic items like a master in no time. So we've got at least one person who tolerates Tyson and treats him like another person, which is nice.
Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that I wanted the chapter to lean into more,
Mhm.
which is just meeting these other cabins and named campers from the other cabins,
Yeah.
which again, I talked about, I feel like at length already with how I wanted the time at Camp Half-Blood to be spent and the narrative that could have been crafted in terms of the campers having to take over the camp and make sure that it's safe and
Yeah.
defy these absolutely idiotic, if not outright malicious, formal leaders and taking things into their own hands. And this is where, we meet Selena for a bit and she's helping out Percy, and we get another reference to Beckendorf, who's helping out Tyson. And there are more parts throughout this chapter where, yeah, we get to hear about more people from the other cabins who are in more of these leadership roles, which again, it makes me think that Rick at one point was trying to set up, or maybe this is his attempt to set up, there are other people at camp that have a vested interest in Camp Half-Blood outside of just Percy and Annabeth.
Yeah. And to your point of kind of the things to call them suggestions, some of the suggestions you made last episode, at the end of this whole interaction with Percy talking about Beckendorf, he starts talking about things he's been doing at the camp. And the last thing he mentions is that even though Tantalus had insisted that they forget trying to protect the camp, some of the
Mhm.
campers had quietly kept it up, working out a schedule during their free times. And that, I think, is exactly what you and I wanted. And it's
Yes.
disappointing that it ends up just being like this one little throwaway line of, don't worry, someone's protecting the camp. When it's
Yes.
like, we could have had even just one scene where Percy sits down with someone that he has guard
Mhm.
duty with would have been really interesting if it was a character like Beckendorf or Selena that we could get to know a little bit better, or even Annabeth, to give them one more chance to interact and kind of argue with one another
Mhm.
before resolving everything toward the end of the chapter and kind of further deepen their frustrations.
Yeah, dude, I totally agree. Having a page or a page and a half or 2 pages of this kind of fluff that we're gonna get to, that is just some good campers and Samaritans out on patrol, I think would have been fucking awesome. Like, there are so many references in this chapter to Apollo Cabin, but we don't get
Mhm.
any named characters from Apollo Cabin. I think it would have been really cool if we see Percy with maybe one of the Stoll brothers and somebody from the Apollo Cabin and, like, Clarice or whatever.
Yeah.
Just get a different dynamic going that, once again, fleshes out the other campers more to indicate, yeah, they are not a monolith here. Not everybody is either A, bullying Percy, or B, wants to abandon keeping this place safe in the name of entertainment. And they could
Yeah.
have talked about that too, because that is a huge issue. It could have even been the night before the chariot race. Maybe Connor Stoll is like, man, I'm going to be losing out on sleep. Brother's not going to be happy about this. We really want to win that race. And the Apollo camp member says something like, "Oh, but, we're not gonna have a race if monsters attack us in the dead of night." Whatever. Again, I hate doing this kind of alt revision just off the top of my head, but that's the kind of stuff where all the components are here, and it's so sad that we don't really get that.
Mhm. It almost makes me wonder just because the number of mentions adjacent to, like, the border patrol stuff in this chapter and the previous one make it feel like it might have been there in a previous version of the novel, in a previous draft, that sort of thing, and maybe it got cut for editorial for not being as plot relevant as other things, or because it didn't move things forward, or wouldn't have aligned with the target audience. I'm just spitballing there, but there's just so much there that I agree. It almost feels like there's gotta be some reason that it's not included despite so much good setup for it being there.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, we don't get it. We do get a passing mention of the climbing wall. Percy, when he's frustrated, not spending time with Annabeth, he's going to archery class and he's doing arts and crafts. And notably, he manages to scale the climbing wall in full lava and earthquake mode. So applause for Percy. Golf claps all around. That's impressive.
Yeah, talk about growth. Apparently, he's not out of it anymore. He's back to peak physicality. He did it.
At least in his climbing wall skills, because
Uh-huh.
dang. It does
But
also
I have to
mention
believe if you can scale the climbing wall at maximum fucking death capability, you're back. I don't care if you're out of practice with fighting with a sword, you're back. You're basically Spider-Man at that point.
that I'll give you that much. It must be insane to be able to scale that wall. Again, in full lava earthquake mode. Now, because Poseidon is god of earthquakes, it does make me question if potentially Percy has, like, some internal balancing sensor that's better than some of the other demigods, so he can hang on during the earthquakes better than perhaps others.
That's so silly. He's got earthquake resistance, but only his cerebellum is, like, overgrown in one small part. His balance is just impeccable when the ground gets kinda shaky.
Only when the ground gets shaky, though.
That's that's so dumb, but I do love that.
It's the same thing that keeps him from getting seasick. I'm tapping
Yep.
my head, Jack. I've put it all together.
Dude, you clearly are seeing past what I am, beyond the veil, into the matrix with this. And that's how you
In
know that this is a really compelling chapter, when Connor starts thinking about, "Yeah, maybe it's a god power that he doesn't get shaken up."
either which way, Percy, as we mentioned, he scales that, he's doing his activities, and on one of the days, he chooses to just sit at the top of Half Blood Hill. He's
Mhm.
lamenting how the whole hill seems to be infected from the poison, and everything is just slowly dying. And he
Yeah.
says, the longer I sat there, the angrier I got. And everybody get
I
out your bingo sheets because it's time to talk about Luke.
Yeah, I know, just really quick, because I do wanna set this up. I really did like this moment, this little
Mhm.
aside set piece. This is not what I would consider fluff. I actually think this might be one of the most important
I totally
sections of
agree.
this chapter. So I am going to just read it verbatim to just really set the scene.
Mhm.
So this is when Percy is out on patrol late one night. The sun is setting. I sat at the top of Half Blood Hill and watched the dryads come and go, singing to the dying pine tree. Satyrs brought their reed pipes and played nature magic songs, and for a while, the pine needles seemed to get fuller. The flowers on the hill smelled a little sweeter, and the grass looked greener. But as soon as the music stopped, the sickness crept back into the air. The whole hill seemed to be infected, dying from the poison that had sunk into the tree's roots. The longer I sat there, the angrier I got. Luke had done this. I remembered his sly smile, the dragon claw scar across his face. He'd pretended to be my friend, and the whole time he'd been Kronos' number one servant. I opened the palm of my hand. The scar Luke had given me last summer was fading, but I could still see it. A white asterisk shaped wound where his pit scorpion had stung me. I thought about what Luke had told me right before he tried to kill me. Goodbye, Percy. There's a new golden age coming. You won't be a part of it. Now we can talk
I
about Luke.
No, I was gonna say, I really enjoyed that, and what I was gonna say about Luke is absolutely, I think, the point you were making in reading the first paragraph as well.
Mhm,
Percy, despite having possibly one of his worst weeks ever at Camp Half-Blood, is still in awe of the magic and the little things, the way that the satyrs and the dryads are trying to bring this tree back to life. They recognize the importance of it, and contrasting that to the bitterness that Luke has. And I think what Percy is kind of grappling with in this moment is he doesn't want to be that bitter. If nothing else, all of this is to him worth protecting, even when it is at its worst.
mhm.
And I think that is important moments, as you said, for Percy, because that's him recognizing and understanding. And
Yeah,
there's just some weight there that I think, especially coming off of book one, where you end with a lot of this Luke really trying to convince Percy, and when he realizes he can't be convinced, going, "Yeah, well, you were a problem anyway, time to kill you." Percy getting to see that once more and go, "No, I may be in some of the same situations as him, but I just refuse to make the same choices. I can't. I won't."
mhm. Yeah, I really love that, and on a slightly different lens or through a slightly different lens, this entire section also just that first paragraph where he's talking about the nature spirits and the satyrs coming, and the brief bit of respite that they seem to be able to provide is undone almost immediately after they stop. There is a futility in what they're doing. And that alone is just heartbreaking. I have a special place in my heart for the nature spirits. They're always so meek and they're always just pitching in because that is what they do. They are not expecting anything else in return outside of just basic respect and decency from the campers who are residing within their bounds.
Mhm.
And to see it work ever so slightly, and there's just this bit of hope that maybe potentially the magic is working, and then as they take a breath because they can't play any longer, it just gets back to dour and dying, and I feel like that is a direct parallel, which is not really drawn out much, between this, "Oh, we're just gonna keep, bread and circuses and play these games and keep us distracted," when everything is going to shit.
Yeah.
That brief moment of respite, which comes from distraction, is not going to help anything. It is only going to have things continue to be worse. Something drastic and extreme has to be done, but there has
Yeah.
to at least be something. And Percy's already acknowledged that in some prior chapters, but I feel like this is a very good physical representation of that.
I really like that lens. And to take it a step further, when you start to think about who really makes Camp Half-Blood run, the dryads are frequently depicted as the people who are tending to the fields, the strawberry groves, which we know make the camp money, and they are often serving and presenting the food. The satyrs are the ones that bring campers in. Without campers, there is no Camp Half-Blood. And Tantalus, as he will mention, I think it's actually next chapter when he talks about how he's a king, but we all know because we listened to last episode, Tantalus is a king who was most prized by the gods. Here he is going, it's fine. Let them figure it out. We're chilling. We're going to have a chariot race for me. Not to be political, but doesn't that feel
Uh-huh.
notable in our current climate?
Yes.
And they've ousted Chiron, who we may have our moments of judgment for Chiron, but being a centaur is also representative of that link of the nature spirits. This, in a certain sense, is, as Chiron is ousted, the nature spirits representation being ousted. So they're left to, as you said, at the time of sunset, off in the distance, no campers are around other than Percy, trying to do the actual work. and no one
Yeah.
supporting them.
Yeah. The work doesn't stop just because you're tired or don't want to do it. And I feel like it is exceedingly telling that there are no campers here helping out. I mean, fuck, there should be people from Apollo Cabin here or the
Apollo Cabin?
Demeter
No,
Cabin or
Demeter, yeah,
yeah,
like,
I mean both, but like
yes.
one is healing and the other is nature. Like there should be other people here all the time.
Yeah,
And there's
practically
not.
24/7.
And there isn't, which again shows that there is a severe misappropriation of priority, or maybe
Mhm.
a severe lack of understanding of how dire the situation really is. And
Yeah,
it is not being helped by Tantalus, who is actively distracting and seemingly hoping on the downfall of this camp directly, and Mr. D, who is just fucking away from the wheel. Like, he does not fucking care.
yeah. Which is particularly disappointing because we know the satyrs are attendants of Dionysus, which means
Mhm.
he's absolutely gotta be aware that this is going on. You'd expect to see him out there at any point being like, "Ah, yeah, I probably should make sure that my half-sister's spirit doesn't die in this tree."
Right. I mean, dude, I'm sorry that I keep doing all these rewrites and hypotheticals because that doesn't change the book we're reading right now. But how fucking cool would it have been if Percy is by himself doing his patrol and he's like, "You know what? I'm gonna go up by the tree and just sit on the hill." And he sees Mr. D out there with the satyrs. And it's the first time that maybe the mask is down or he looks even remotely concerned, or the fact that his presence is there indicates that one, shit is really bad, but two, deep down, there is a part of him that wants camp to be safe. He does care.
Yeah, that does care, exactly what I was gonna say.
And again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm mischaracterizing Mr. D in my head, but I feel like all this book has done is made me think he is outright antagonistic and doesn't want Camp Half-Blood to be safe. But that doesn't feel like that's true. Like, isn't it found that Mr. D actually does really care about camp? And yeah, he was
Yeah.
sent here as punishment initially, but these little fuckers have really grown on him. And also, isn't Dionysus historically one of the gods that actually kind of enjoys heroes? Maybe I'm misremembering.
Dionysus, because he himself started as a hero,
Yes.
has a soft spot for other heroes that are punished by the gods because he himself, being a child of Zeus that isn't by Hera, was of course punished by Hera. But
Mhm.
he does, of course, detest heroes because of how they mistreated his wife.
Ah, right.
So he's got complicated feelings in that regard, which is why, like, that is why he often portrays this outward antagonistic persona toward the
Mhm.
heroes of Camp Half-Blood, but tends to eventually be like, "But this isn't your fault, and the gods have placed these burdens on you. I get it. Once upon a time, I was you." So
Mhm.
I agree. I think that what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and it does feel like there's, again, an opportunity to just further add character. Actually, I'm gonna change my phrasing. There is not an opportunity to add character to Camp Half-Blood because Camp Half-Blood already has so much character. There's just an opportunity to use it. And that
Actually use it.
honestly, I think what makes you and I so frustrated. It's not like, oh, an additional character really would have made this better. It's you already have all the puzzle pieces. Why can't we put them together in a cool and unique way that would not affect the overall narrative, but could further some of the background of what's going on and the stakes? And it, and unfortunately, I think just misses that opportunity, which is a little unfortunate.
Yeah.
But as Percy has his lamenting of what Luke had done and the frustration, he has to eventually go to bed. And that night, he has more demigod dreams. Except these aren't your regular demigod dreams. These
Yeah.
are more dreams specifically of Grover. And hey, would you look at that? Later in the chapter, he's gonna finally get some answers as to what this is specifically. We're not there
Mhm.
yet.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, all he gets this time is, "It's here. He likes sheep." Which are
Yeah.
very odd details to include, Grover. Where is here? Who likes sheep?
Yeah, it's a little bit odd. I'm gonna give it a pass because it is outright stated that what he's trying to do is violently difficult. So the
Oh,
fact that he even
absolutely.
got some things through, we'll take it. I will say, there is one aspect of this that did frustrate me a little bit, and it's happened before, and I guarantee it'll happen again, and it's probably because it's middle grade fiction, and this is just the easy way for there to be some level of mystery or stakes or conflict. And Percy says, "I thought about telling Annabeth about my dreams, but I would have felt stupid. I mean, he likes sheep. She would have thought I was crazy. No, Percy, you're fucking stupid for not telling her. Every single dream you've told her about where you're like, this seems kind of weird, she's figured out what it's meant immediately."
Literally immediately. Absolutely. And I feel like Annabeth, whose favorite hero is Odysseus, would be like, "Sheep? I know someone who likes sheep."
Right. Or just, she might have even done the thing where she isn't confident enough saying outright what it is, but like, wait, is that actually what he said? You're certain that's what he said? And then she'd
Mhm.
start noodling on it.
That is
But to
basically
him,
what happens at the end of the chapter.
yeah, pretty much. It's just weird that, again, the justification is Percy's like, "It would be kinda stupid." It's like, why? Based on every experience you've had, it is never stupid to ask Annabeth about your dreams, at all.
Yeah, of all the demigod shit that you've experienced, weird dreams have gotta be some of the most standard demigod shit you've done.
Yes,
At this point, you
especially
should be like, "Hmm, that definitely means something. I'll have to figure that
yes,
out."
especially when it involves Grover.
Yes.
That frustrated me a little bit, but again, it's whatever. Percy's a fucking dumbass. So, I guess I'll let it slide. And it's the night before the race. And,
It's
Percy, his mind is going elsewhere, even if he
such an
does have his
important
eye on the
race.
prize. What was that?
I said, "And it's such an important race."
It really is. And, Percy, for as smart or maybe wise as he's been with keeping up doing patrols, he is a dumbass, thrill-seeking 13-year-old, and he is kinda looking forward to it. He's This next part is he's just like, "Man, Tyson and I finished our chariot. It was really cool."
Yeah.
just starts just starts talking about how Tyson made all the metal parts in the armory's forge, and he sanded down the wood and actually put the carriage together, and how they designed it and what it represented and what it meant. And his eye is not necessarily on victory, it's more just to prove a point, which he's mentioned as maybe showing that he isn't ashamed of Tyson as his brother. Maybe it'll make other people like Tyson more, whatever. But he's like, Tyson has to ride shotgun. I can't just do this by myself. We are going to tank our chances at winning if he's there, but it would be wrong not to have him participate because he says he's huge. Just sheer size alone, he's going to slow us down, which is fair. And this little back and forth now as they being Tyson and Percy are in their cabin and just in the dark, kind of quietly turning in for bed. Tyson asks, "You are mad?" And Percy realizes that he'd been scowling and goes, "Nah, I'm not mad." Tyson goes and he lays in his bunk and it's quiet. It is noted that Tyson is so big, he does not fit on his bed. If he pulls up the covers, his feet stick out from the bottom, his legs are like dangling off the foot of the bed. And again, this is another one of those sections where I'm like, what cold-hearted bastard was I as a 12-year-old that I
I was
didn't
about
like
to
this
say the
guy?
same thing of, like,
Because
every time we get one of these moments, I'm like, "Fuck, I was such an asshole as a kid."
I know, I know. We get this sad image of Tyson just, "You're mad," and Percy lies because he is mad. Tyson doesn't bother him anymore, and he doesn't fit on his bed, and he just makes a statement in the dark, "I am a monster." And
Holy shit,
Percy
dude.
I know, Percy says, "Don't say that." And Tyson just continues, "It is okay. I will be a good monster. Then you will not have to be mad." It fuck.
Yeah, what do you say?
I know.
And even
And that's what
Percy,
Percy
like,
says.
yeah, Percy has this moment where it's just dot, 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 and you can tell he's trying to think of anything to say, and I think what he ends up saying is not what he's feeling or what he means, as he goes,
Mhm,
"I never had a half-brother before," and he says, "I tried to keep my voice from cracking." Percy is suddenly being faced with the exact same thing, I think, to some extent, that you and I are, of everyone else shitting on Tyson and him realizing that he was also mad at him and going, "Fuck, but you don't deserve that."
mhm.
And, I mean, God, just something about, "It is okay, I will be a good monster. Then you will not have to be mad." So much is packed into that one line. Tyson does, in fact, as he just said, see himself as a monster and feels the additional pressure to do more good because of it.
Yeah.
He does think that Percy is mad at him, which I don't think is the truth. I think Percy really is right now just kind of mad at the world.
Mhm.
And the fact that Tyson thinks it's because of him is so sad.
Yeah. And I don't think he's wrong, though. I mean, it's not entirely being angry at Tyson, but there is an aspect of Tyson's existence that is exacerbating this angst and frustration that Percy is feeling. I mean, that's been made abundantly clear throughout this chapter. But it's the fact that you're right. Tyson deserves none of his anger or resentment.
Yeah.
Literally none. The only sin that he's committed is being born. That's it.
Is existing and then going out of his way to help Percy time and time again, which led him to being at Camp Half-Blood in the first place.
Yes. And it reminds me of there are two quotes, and I'm gonna nerd out for a little bit here that I'm sure can be traced back to more profound sources, at least in terms of their core concept. But I think of Parthenax from Skyrim, and I think of Mewtwo from the first Pokemon movie.
Wow, you really are gonna nerd out, but I'm here for
I
both
know
of these, and I like both of
because
them.
there's and I'm gonna butcher these quotes, I'm sure, but Parthenax, there's this big thing. He's a dragon, and the dragons are like ontologically evil creatures in the world of the Elder Scrolls series. But there's this one good, wise old dragon named Parthenax who the player confronts, and if you choose to speak with him, he asks like, "Why are you good? Like, why are you a good dragon? Does that mean all dragons are good?" And Parthenax said, "No, no, I used to be really fucking bad. I did really horrible things. I was like the general for that big bad ultra evil dragon." But what does it say about a creature and goodness? Is it more good to be born that way, or is it better to be born evil and overcome your nature and become good? What is more profound? What is the better good? Or does it even matter? And it's left, open. You can interpret that how you will. But that, again, for obvious reasons, reminds me of Tyson. He is born as a monster. People view him as just an outright, again, ontologically evil, bad thing. And he is saying, even if that's true, I am going to make the choice to be good. I'll be the exception to the rule, even if I'm the only exception to the rule. The Mewtwo quote is very similar. This is at the end where Mewtwo is in his adult man stoic voice speaking to Mew, who is only able to say Mew. It's like, hmm, I see now. It is not the circumstances of one's birth that determines who one is. It is what one does with the gift of life that determines their character.
You're pretty
And Mew
close.
affirms. He affirms by saying Mew. And it's beautiful. Again, I feel like those are both very, very pertinent
Yeah.
to what Tyson is saying. And it struck a chord with me because those are pieces of media that I viewed as a child, but I don't know that I related it to this book as I was reading it as a kid.
Yeah, but they were formative, and so it's really cool to be able to go back and see that, like, these other pieces of media are all kind of interlocking,
Mhm.
and What I found really interesting was the way that Percy responds is he starts talking about Grover and he feels like he should be doing something to help. And at this point, Tyson doesn't respond. Tyson has fallen asleep. And that's good because what Percy says next shows that he does not get what Tyson gets yet. He
Yep.
says, I'm sorry. It's not your fault. I'm mad at Poseidon. I feel like he's trying to embarrass me, like he's trying to compare us or something. And I don't understand why. And the fact that Percy thinks that a comparison to Tyson is in any way embarrassing shows that he has not yet figured out what he needs to learn in this book. He has not finished his character arc. I mean, obviously, we're very close to the beginning of the book still, but it is very much setting up that, like, hey, Percy has some growing to do.
Mhm.
And he's on the right path as he hears Tyson snoring and he says, "Good night, big guy," showing that he does care for this brother monster somewhere in the middle, but he recognizes that Tyson is a person. He
Mhm.
just doesn't know what to make of it yet. And it's
Yep.
fascinating, really. Like, this is, I think, so far one of the most interesting things that this book has done in its slow moments.
Yeah. No, I agree. Again, this is why I didn't outright dislike this chapter. I
Mhm.
thought that was really great. And I do like how Percy is very clearly flailing to no pun intended, but flailing to stay afloat in the weight of everything that is happening. From every angle, it's just bad. And he recognizes that. And this is another aspect that I think, again, for many reasons that are relatable now based on the current, we'll say, world climate. He says, "I feel like I should be doing something to help, but I don't know what." And I think anybody with half a conscience has been there before. And it is not
Yeah.
a new sentiment, but what Percy, I think, is learning, or maybe already does know, but just needs a reminder of, is that what do you do when you can't do nothing, but there's nothing you can do? You do what you can. And Percy is trying to figure it out what it is that he can do.
Yeah.
And that's a
He just
very
needs a
interesting
push.
concept. Yes,
Mhm.
he does. He has to be the one to take the lead, as opposed to last book where he was really following the entire time.
Yeah. No, you make a really good point, and that's actually not an angle that I'd really considered, but so much of what he did last book is Grover gets him to Camp Half-Blood, Grover and Sally. Once he's there, he's directed by Luke, then he goes to the Oracle, then on the quest, it's a lot of Annabeth making sure they're on track.
Mhm.
So little of what they did in The Lightning Thief is instigated by Percy, and everything they're gonna have to do from here on out is going to have to be instigated by Percy, and that's a big
Yeah.
change.
Mhm. And I love that. I
Mhm.
really, really do love that as a theme. There are these nuggets where I'm like, "Oh, this is really fucking good." And
Yeah.
if there were about 5 pages of just kind of random fluff trimmed down from this chapter, I'd be like, "This was great." But again,
Mhm.
there's just there are all these little islands of greatness among a, again, no pun intended, sea of kinda nothing.
Yeah, just kind of bland other parts. But one of the other things I at least liked about this chapter was this interaction with Grover, as
Yes.
the empathy link is now properly in and working, and they're able to communicate. And so Percy, he's dreaming again, and he's seeing Grover wearing a wedding dress. And I like the way he describes it because he says, he was staring right at me, like I was a TV program he'd been waiting for. "Thank the gods!" he yelped. "Can you hear me?" And I just love that because it really it paints a picture that is unique from any other demigod dream that Percy has had thus far, and will continue to be disparate from future ones that he has as we go forward. This is something different. He's able to slowly begin to respond. He looks around and he can smell the stench of sheep. He can see a refrigerator sized boulder blocking the only exit to this cave. And Grover is like, "Please, Percy, you have to hear me. I'm struggling, man."
Uh-huh.
And
I like that you're
finally,
Grover is slowly turning into Shaggy.
I just
Like,
feel like
Percy, we gotta get out of here.
I feel like Shaggy's fearful. "Fuck,
Oh
I've
yeah.
gotten myself into this situation, and I knew it was the right thing to do, but, oh, I don't wanna be here," is so Grover's energy.
Oh, he's a brave coward. Yeah, there's a
Mhm.
reason I hear that, and I think there's a reason that you've slowly morphed into it. It fits
Yep.
perfectly. I just wanted to point that out.
We get Percy finally being able to say, "I hear you, Grover, what's going on?" And this is when we start to hear a monstrous voice. "Honey Pie, are you done yet?" Grover flinches and calls out in a falsetto, "Not quite, dearest. A few more days." We learn that he's been delaying this mysterious, monstrous voice by pretending that he's preparing for a wedding, which is, you know what? For all of the shit that we've had that's been kind of mundane over the last 2 chapters, I want this. This is pure
Yeah.
chaos, and I'm here for it.
Oh, dude, this entire bit is the most Greek mythological feeling thing that has happened in this book.
It, frankly, reminds me altogether too much of the satyr play we read in episode 1.
Yes. Yes. That is exactly what I was thinking of. I'm sure, obviously, Rick is taking direct inspiration,
Mhm.
right? But it also reminds me of, I think also from the Odyssey, isn't it Odysseus' wife keeps, like, putting off her having to meet suitors by making, like, a
Yes.
veil or something?
Mhm.
Am I misremembering?
No, it's her father's burial shroud, or her
Yes.
father-in-law's burial shroud that she unweaves every night to delay the suitors. You're absolutely correct,
Yes.
and
And
I love that
uh-huh.
you point that out because we've pointed it out a couple of times in this novel. It is drawing heavily from the Odyssey, so I think there is no doubt that even though it's not one to one, it's super in line with what's happening there,
Mhm.
which is just so fun.
Oh,
And
yeah.
as Grover's trying to give any information, he's like, "You have to help me! No time! I'm stuck in this cave on an island in the sea!" And Percy, ever with the good questions,
Uh-huh.
"Where?"
Uh-huh. Simple one word. Yep.
And Grover hits him back with, "I went to Florida and turned left." Now, he did say specifically he didn't know exactly where he was, but went to Florida and turned left is gotta be some of the craziest directions that are, like, somewhat useful, but completely useless at the same time.
Yeah. I would lean far more into it is completely useless. I mean, I guess the thought would be because he was starting from New York, so he was heading down south,
Yep.
and if you're looking at a map and heading south, you're southbound, taking a left would be heading east.
Yep.
Maybe I think maybe that's the takeaway we're supposed to have, but that's
I
such
think
a
that is
big
literally
guess.
it. Is he somewhere east of Florida in the Atlantic?
Yeah,
Great.
so not super helpful. And Percy, again, a good question, asks, "What?" Like,
Yeah.
"Could you please clarify? How did you" and Grover just at this point is steamrolling. It seems clear that there is a timer that is on whatever this strange connection is. Grover says, "It's a trap. It's the reason no satyr has ever returned from this quest. He's a shepherd, Percy, and he has it. Its nature magic is so powerful, it smells just like the great god Pan. The satyrs come here thinking they've found Pan, and they get trapped and eaten by Polyphemus." All right, you got the name.
I was about to say dun dun dun. Name
We
drop.
got it. Percy, for somebody who has a weirdly, like, specific memory of Chiron's class, does not remember Polyphemus. He goes, "Poly who?"
God, so painful. It's like, how does Percy remember the most obscure fucking pieces of Greek mythology when he has to? And then it's like, the Odyssey, never read it.
Never heard it. Yeah.
Like, come on,
That was
man.
written by that Simpsons guy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
And,
that is something
we
Percy
I
would
do
say.
like once again, this is probably the most actual information we've gotten from direct questions ever in this series,
Mhm.
because Percy says, "Polly who?" Grover says, "The Cyclops!" He's exasperated. He's like, "Come on, dude. I don't have time for all these minute details. It's the Cyclops. I almost got away. I made it all the way to St. Augustine. Now Percy's remembering his prior dreams. But he
Mhm.
followed you. He trapped you in a bridal boutique." Grover says, "That's right. My first empathy link must have worked then." All right. So that's where we get finally the name drop of
Yep, the empathy
whatever
link as
this
well.
this thing is, the empathy link. And Grover, again, I really like this concept. It is silly, but it feels like it's from an epic poem. It
Mhm.
really does. I got this bridal dress. It's the only thing keeping me alive. He thinks I smell good, but I told him it's just goat scented perfume. And his eye can't see all that well. It's still half blind from the last time somebody tried to poke it out. We could assume that is Odysseus.
I was about to say he misspoke. That's supposed to say from the last time nobody poked it out.
Ah,
But
true. Good one, Connor. But he's like, "Dude, this guy's an idiot, but he will figure out what's going on eventually. And I've only got 2 weeks to finish this bridal train." He's getting really impatient. He's basically saying, "Dude, he's really horny, Percy. He's gonna fuck me to death. Please, you gotta help."
We are on the most important time limit you've ever been on. Remember how the
Uh-huh.
world was gonna end last summer? You gotta believe me, this is worse. For
This
me
is so much
specifically.
worse. Oh my gosh.
And
And
Percy, I love that he breaks from the good questions to go, wait a minute, this Cyclops thinks you're, and Grover's like, catch up. Yes, he thinks I'm a lady Cyclops.
uh-huh. And he wants to marry me. And
Oh
I
God.
do like Percy. Percy stays locked in. He says, "Under different circumstances, I might have busted out laughing." But Grover's
Understandable.
voice was deadly serious. He was shaking with fear. And he promises, he says, I will come rescue you. Where are you?" Just again, really hammering home. Where the fuck are you, dude?
Need that detail.
And there we get Grover looks at the camera. "The Sea of Monsters, of course." Ah, title
Whoa!
card. Whoa, we're here, ladies and gentlemen. Well, roll credits.
But this is good. We have all the pieces. As you said, this has got to be one of the most like informative pieces of a Percy Jackson book. Now, granted, we're 1 1/4 books in so far, but of those 1 1/4 books, damn, no one has ever answered this many questions in a
I
row.
know. More props to Grover for literally being the GOAT. He's like, "You know how
Yeah,
often that we have dealt with people not answering Percy's questions? I'm not gonna do that to my boy."
Grover, we love him. And Polyphemus does too. As the time is running short, Percy's like, "The sea of what?" And Grover's like, I already told you. I don't know exactly where it is, but like, go ask Annabeth or some shit." Obviously, he does not say that, but that is the clear implications.
I really like this little plot hook that's added too,
Mhm.
where Grover is like, "Dude, I am so fucking sorry about this, but you've seen my situation. It's really, really bad.
So
This
dire.
empathy link this empathy link, I really didn't have a choice. Our emotions are connected now. And if I die," and Percy just is like a trained pro at this, "Don't tell me. I'll die too." And Grover's like, Well, maybe not. You might just be in a coma, in a vegetative state for multiple years, but let's not figure that out. You just need to get me."
Oh gosh. Yeah, and then from the background you get, "Honey pie, dinner time, yummy, yummy sheep meat." Grover's whimpering like, "Please hurry."
You gotta hurry up.
It's so good. I loved all of this, and as the dream begins to fade, Grover says, "Sweet dreams, don't let me die."
Yeah. Well, actually, one last thing, because this
Mhm.
is important. Percy has one more question. It is a good question.
It
Unfortunately,
is a
the
good
timer
question, yes.
does run out. He says, "Wait, you said it was here. What?" And then it's at this point, you know what? They were doing good. They were doing really good. Can't be mad. We don't know what it is, but we are gonna basically figure out what it
Yes,
is, or at the very
pretty
least,
quick
Annabeth is
here.
gonna figure it out pretty immediately. And yep, Grover wishes him a good sleep, and once again is like, "Do not fucking let me die, Percy, please." And I love this. Once again, Tyson's becoming my favorite character because Percy's dream fades and he wakes up with a startle. It's early morning, and Tyson was clearly perturbed by this dream. I'm sure Percy was violently tossing and turning, I'm sure muttering to himself, and Tyson is just staring down at him, one big brown eye, just full of concern, just wants to make sure that his brother's okay. He asks, he's like, "Are you okay?" Now that is sweet and adorable, but this next line is not helping Tyson stocks in terms of getting on Percy's, like, really good side, because Percy notes that his voice sent a chill down his back, because Tyson sounded almost exactly like the monster I'd heard in my dream. Oof.
Wow, so all Cyclops sound the same now?
Yeah, Percy's got a lot of growth. Alright, he's got a lot of growth to do. He's had Annabeth chirping in his ear.
But that brings us to the morning of the race. Percy says it's
Mhm.
hot and humid. Fog is laying low on the ground like sauna steam. And then we get a weird detail.
Yeah.
Millions of birds were roosting in the trees. Fat gray and white pigeons, except they didn't coo like regular pigeons. They made this annoying metallic screeching sound that reminded me of a submarine radar.
Yeah, but Connor, as weird as that is, nobody fucking cares,
Yeah,
actually.
literally fucking no one,
Yeah.
including Mr. D, who can't even be bothered to show up for the race. After all, he never gets up before 10 o'clock.
Yeah, so I don't know why you're fixating on that little detail, Connor. I
Oh, of
don't know why
course.
you're fixating on this detail because nobody else cares, and it's not like it's a just immediate reminder of what the name of the chapter is. Man, I wonder what's gonna happen with those things. Thanks for having some level of ambiguity, really. No,
Uh,
that's great.
well, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna just put it out there. You guys are all demigods at Camp Half Blood. Who is like the prototypical demigod? It's your boy Heracles, okay? You guys should all know the 12 labors of Heracles like the back of your hand. This should be, when in school they're like, you're gonna memorize all 50 states.
Yeah.
You should be sitting there going, you're gonna memorize all 12 labors of Hercules. You should be seeing those and going, you don't think those are the man eating birds, do you?
Or let's just forego these people having any level of book smarts. You are in Camp Half-Blood. You are a demigod, and the one thing that's keeping you safe from monsters doesn't work anymore. If I see anything out of the ordinary, I am saying we have a problem. I don't know what it is, but that is not normal and is probably here to kill us.
But it's chill. It's totally fine. No one's
I
concerned at
guess, dude.
all.
Here's the thing. I really do hate that that detail was put in this early.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's so weird that it's put in right because I really do like the next few sections. I actually
Mhm.
really like the setting of the environment as it's early morning, hot and humid. There's a fog that's rolling across the ground. That's really neat. That's a
Mhm.
really cool setting. And it's a type of environment we haven't really seen with Camp Half-Blood yet. And I do like how, honestly, the rest of this is described. This entire next section where it's all about the actual chariot race and leading up to it, I think is really fucking cool.
Yeah, it works really well.
So it's just very like, again, it'd be so easy to not have that. I also noticed that there were like a million of these robot birds, like right here. There's a part where they're mentioned again where it would have been much better to mention them for the first time
Mhm.
because at least, and we'll get to it, but at least then there was already stuff in motion. People were excited. There was kind of chaos. People weren't listening to each other. And so it would make sense that saying, hey, there might be a problem might not get an immediate response.
Yeah. It doesn't feel quite right, but that aside, as you pointed out, the rest of this is really cool. I really like
Yes.
the way they describe the different chariots that everyone is riding after Tantalus explains the rules. He says,
Yeah.
weapons are allowed, dirty tricks are expected, but try not to kill anybody. Any killing will result in harsh punishment. no s'mores at the campfire for a week. Because we've seen that that'll work so
Right.
effectively in the past.
Yeah,
Because,
I mean
might I remind you, hold on,
mhm,
from book
mhm.
one, in Capture the Flag, the same, as we kind of put it, the same sort of vibe of chapter. Percy says, no maiming. And an Ares camper says, oops, guess I lost my dessert privilege.
Yep,
Literally the same thing.
and
Why would it work any better?
and you hit on something that I was also gonna mention, which we also talked about, I think, again, last chapter.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's supposed to be like, "Ooh, this is sinister coming from Tantalus." This is literally Chiron, though. If it were Chiron saying this, it would not be out of place.
Yeah, we'd be like, ah, teehee, so Chiron. No,
"Oh, how
dude, that is
quirky."
exactly the point I was gonna fucking make.
Yeah. This is yet another instance of there just is no difference. Or maybe the fact that Camp Half-Blood already really sucked. Like, they didn't change anything. He's just saying it in a more mildly sinister kind of way. That's it.
Yep.
Before we get to the actual race itself and before we explain these chariots, I'm shocked you skipped over this. Where it also gets really cool is how the racetrack had been built. Because again, there wasn't one. It Chariot races had not been a thing for quite some time. There is a grassy field in between the archery range and the woods, and the Hephaestus cabin had reused the bronze bulls, which have been completely like reprogrammed and tamed because their fucking heads were smashed in, and they plowed the track in a few minutes, which is literally the myth.
Yeah,
I thought that was really cool. We just talked about that.
that is really cool. I was so excited for my quote from the other book that I mixed it up and I thought that we got the description of how they made the track when they talked about the Hephaestus chariot.
Mhm. No, it was earlier. I guess the
Because
only question is because they're tamed now, did they also need to get greased up and naked?
probably, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
But that all being established, now we can move on to the chariots, Jack.
Yes.
And
So
these are
fucking
fucking
cool.
cool. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So they start with the Hephaestus cabin, which is led by Beckendorf. And as they go out onto the track, Percy says they had a sweet ride made of bronze and iron. Even the horses, which were magical automatons like the Colchis bulls. That's so cool. I love that. Of
Yeah.
course they made horses. Why wouldn't they? But then it gets better. Frankly, I think Hephaestus might actually get outmatched by the Ares chariot, which I hate to say, which is blood red, pulled by two grisly horse skeletons. Clarice
Uh-huh.
climbs aboard with a batch of javelins, spiked balls, caltrops, and a bunch of other nasty toys.
Yeah. What the fuck? They can do that? They have
Yeah, that's what I
necromancy?
was thinking.
That's like, if I were Percy, I'd be like, "Whoa! Where the fuck did you guys get this from? Why do we just have skeleton horses lying around, and why are they yours?"
That's the real reason that Tyson was up early to see Percy having a bad dream is he's looking out the window like, who is fucking chanting over there? It's just the Ares cabin summoning demons behind theirs.
Speaking in fucking backwards Latin as fog is rolling across the ground. Yeah.
Yes, horses claw their way out.
Oh, I love that. That's so fucking good. Tyson was concerned not for Percy. He's like, Percy, you gotta wake up. Something
Yeah.
bad's happening.
He's like, are you okay? Because I think I need your help.
Oh my god, I love that. Yeah, it's really fucking it's just this is the kind of stuff that again, I wish the chapter leaned into more. And you're right, it's not adding character, it's utilizing it. I
Mhm.
love how tailored each of these chariots are to the cabins that are using them.
Yeah.
And their strategies for how they're going to actually partake in this race. It just feels like again, it is this is the analog for Capture the Flag, but it feels like it builds on it in a very fun way by saying, not only are we gonna see the different cabins in terms of how they work together and kind of what roles they play within a larger unit, we're gonna see when left to their own devices, what are they going to do? What is their specialization? It just lets them shine in a very creative way. Now, maybe, maybe there's something more sinister to that. Capture the flag, while being inherently competitive, is about teamwork, and this is a division of the cabins for the most part. At the very
Mhm.
least, we know that Annabeth and Percy were going to do it together, but we don't see any instances of people doing the chariot race outside of their own cabins.
Yeah, no, there literally no other cabin will team up, period, full stop. So I actually think that's a really important detail because I do think it's supposed to somewhat represent the division that Tantalus is sowing at Camp Half-Blood. Everyone's doing these really cool specialized things, and that is awesome because it gets to show off what they are capable of. But
Mhm.
especially when you think about the fight with the Colchis Bulls, which have just been re-brought up, that fight works and is so impactful because we get to see Clarice and Percy and Annabeth and Tyson all working together, whether they like it and realize it or not. And that is truly what makes Camp Half-Blood this safe place, the community of the thing. And when they are divided,
Mhm.
they're all less safe and don't question a million birds sitting in trees nearby.
Yep. Yeah. But other chariots that we see, Apollo's cabin. Now, here is personally, and I knew it wouldn't be them just from a meta sense,
Mhm.
but my money would be on Apollo. If I were at Camp Half-Blood and there was a betting pool, I would bet on Apollo.
Really?
Because they're yes, dude, their dad is the guy that drives the fucking sun. He's the chariot guy.
That's true.
Not
I
only
would
that, they're also the ranged experts. You don't need to get close if you can just pick people off from, 100 yards away easy. Just headshot everybody.
That's a good point. I hadn't considered that they would have the advantage of being the best people at just shooting the others. I was gonna put my money in the boat of Athena cabin because of the aforementioned Athena inventing the chariot, which is very canon to this universe, and them presumably having any form of a plan. Whereas, like, Ares cabin, their whole plan is get out there and hit shit.
Yeah. Oh, they're Mad Max. They're Fury Road. That's it. Their plan is attack. Full stop. I get that it's the Athena is like, "Oh, they made the chariot," but just because you made it doesn't mean that you're the best at using it. Again, in the myths, I feel like it would have to be Apollo. Again, he drives the sun. I feel like that's where the debate should end. So I
No,
would
that's
think
why I'm
that
like,
his
frankly,
children Yeah.
I don't have much else to add. Well, I do have something to add, but we'll get to it in the myth section later.
Yes. But
But
they have this beautiful chariot. It's graceful. It's completely gold, like a sun chariot. It's pulled
nice.
by 2 beautiful palominos, and their fighter is armed with a bow. And he did promise, good guy Apollo cabin camper, that he's not gonna shoot regular pointed arrows. So he has, like, blunted he's got, like I'm imagining the Hawkeye green arrow, like, boxing glove arrows.
I
He's
was
just gonna
literally
knock
about to
people
say, are
out.
you also imagining the boxing glove arrow?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
And then, of course, that is followed by the final one that we have not seen yet, which is the Hermes cabin chariot, which is green, kind of old looking, as if it hadn't been out of the garage in years. It didn't look like anything special, but it was manned by the Stoll brothers, and Percy shuddered to think what dirty tricks they'd schemed up. You know what? That feels about right. Not for Hermes, but for the way that Hermes' cabin exists at Camp Half-Blood. That they're like,
Mhm.
yep, we got the fucking old shed chariot. Yay.
Yep,
Thanks,
yeah.
everyone.
The community chariot that was really there to help with, like, landscaping
Hmm.
and is held together with spit, glue, and dreams. But, we got some tricks up our sleeve, and I am a little disappointed because of all that. Not necessarily with the Hermes chariot, but we don't hear what Annabeth's chariot looks like. I guess maybe because it's just, like, a regular nice chariot, just a very
Hmm.
classic, clean, Athena-based, like, "This is well made." I would have liked to at least hear it. I feel like
I
that's
agree.
important.
Get the full lineup. You want the full starting line picture.
E exactly.
But we don't get the description. Percy does walk over though, before the race, he goes up to Annabeth and he tries to tell her about his dream. And she says, "You're trying to distract me." Bold of her to assume that Percy has that much foresight.
I know. I wrote Percy is too dumb for that.
Here's the other thing. I did appreciate that Percy gets Annabeth to hesitate when he brings up Grover. And he says, "I
Yeah.
knew she would never want anything bad to happen to Grover." And so, if nothing else, he's like, "You will believe me if I say Grover is in trouble." But of course, she's like, "Just go back to your chariot. We can discuss this after the race."
Well, yeah, here's the most important part. He relays everything. The reason she thought Percy was distracting her, trying to distract her, is because, like we've said, she immediately deciphers the dream and what
Mhm.
Grover was referring to. She says, "You're trying to distract me." Percy says, "What? No, I'm not." She goes, "Oh, right. Like Grover would just happen to stumble across the one thing that could save the camp." To which Percy again is like, "What do you mean?" Again, he's too stupid for all of that.
Yep.
Annabeth, come on. Quite literally get off your high horse right now. Let's try and be reasonable here. And that's when, she says, "Go back to your chariot," Percy rolls her eyes and says, "I am not making this up. He is in trouble." And she's hesitating. She's like, "Fuck. All right. I am mad at this idiot, but if he's telling the truth, I don't want Grover to be in danger." But it's too late. Chariot race has to begin. She's like, "Dude, if there even was an empathy link, that's so difficult. You're probably just dreaming." And then Percy, his last like Hail Mary, he says, "The Oracle. We should consult the Oracle." And that really does get Annabeth. She frowns at
Mhm.
that because Annabeth knows that Percy would never suggest going to the big house attic, seeing the Oracle, if he was not completely serious, because he fucking hates it there.
Mhm. Dead fucking serious. I fully agree. That is the exact moment when Annabeth is like, "Shit. He means it for real."
Yep. And then the horn sounds. Antyllus calls, "Charioteers, to your mark." Annabeth says, "We'll talk later, after I win." Come on, Annabeth, really?
Now, I'm sure this is the moment where you were mentioning that it's like, this would have been a great place to introduce the demon
Uh-huh.
pigeons, as
Yes.
Percy notes that as he's walking back to his chariot, how many more pigeons were in the trees now, screeching like crazy and making the whole forest rustle. And nobody else seemed to be paying much attention to them, which is crazy. I'm just going to reiterate, this is my last time. I know I've been on it, but like, a million birds? When's the last time you looked up and said, that's a million birds?
Uh, that's it's actually a really good way to look at it. Yeah, that's very true.
Like, I'm sure it's not
There's
actually a million, but how many birds would you have to see to think, I'm not fucking counting. That's a million.
it will contextualize how many fucking birds there are a little bit later, and it makes all of this even more inexcusable. But we're not gonna stop the race. Percy's
We
not
got a
gonna
race
mention
to start,
anything.
baby.
That's right, and, Percy's got a little bit of an issue. Tyson is having some trouble getting the horses under control. Percy's like, "Alright, I'll talk." So he's talking to the horses, and the horses, this is all telepathically, the horses go, "He's a monster, lord!" Percy says, "He's a son of Poseidon, just like me." They go, "No! Monster! Horse eater! Not trusted!" And then Percy says, "I'll give you sugar cubes at the end of the race." And they go, "Oh." They perk up. Sugar cubes? Very big sugar cubes. And apples. Did I mention the apples? And I like there's just a next line. "Finally, they agreed to let me harness them." So he bought
Uh,
them off. That's good. Whatever works.
this moment
And
and the other
mhm,
little moments of comedic interjection do very much work in this chapter. I think
yes.
that's one thing it really does have going for it is some of that classic Camp Half-Blood shenanigan humor.
Yes.
Break up everything. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're so right. I didn't groan at a single joke or retort or remark in this chapter. I thought it was very well done on that front. But I do like we're now again the race is properly beginning, the horses are harnessed, and Percy describes like, "Dude, I don't know if the average person at home has seen a Greek chariot, but it is built for speed, not safety and not comfort. He actually describes it, I think, pretty well. It's
Mhm.
basically a wooden basket, open at the back, mounted on an axle between two wheels. The driver stands up the whole time, and you feel every bump in the road. The carriage is made of such light wood that if you wipe out making the hairpin turns at the other end of the track, you'll probably tip over and crush both the chariot and yourself. And so it's like, this is bad. This is basically balsa wood with no shock absorbers and is incredibly unstable. And we're going to be moving at insanely high speeds. And the odds that you are going to wipe out horrendously is high. And then he ends with, it's an even better rush than skateboarding.
It does make me wonder if the line about going to the skate shop in chapter 1 is just a little detail that got inserted to make this work a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Either that or Rick was like, "No, Percy was always a skater boy."
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I'd buy
I can
it.
see it either way. Yeah, I don't mind it at all. But with that, Percy is now taking the reins, maneuvering the chariot to the starting line, and he hands Tyson a 10-foot pole. He tells Tyson, "Your job is to push the other chariots away if they get too close and deflect anything they might try to throw at us." And Tyson affirms and says, "No hitting ponies with the stick." Oh,
Percy,
man.
affirms and agrees. He says, "No, no people either. If you can help it, we're gonna do a clean race. Just keep the distractions away. Let me concentrate on driving." And Tyson is filled with determination. He says, "We will win." He's beaming. He's just so excited. And then fucking Debbie Downer Percy, Mr. Negative Nelly here, immediately line after, "We are so going to lose." I thought to myself.
I mean, shit,
But
yeah, with that attitude.
I know, seriously, way to manifest your defeat, bro. You're Greek. You should know all about self-fulfilling prophecies. Break that cycle, man. But
Oh, man.
he is Percy Jackson, and in the face of overwhelming odds, he does recognize I still have to try.
Yep.
And this is where we get some of his motivation for why he's working with Tyson, why he's allowing Tyson to be in the chariot with him. And they start off a bit selfless and then progress to more selfish.
Yep.
He says, "I wanted to show the others, well, I wasn't sure what exactly. That Tyson wasn't such a bad guy. Okay, that's fair. That I wasn't ashamed of being seen with him in public. Okay, sure, maybe. Maybe that they hadn't hurt me with all their jokes and name calling." He's like, "Okay, now we've spiraled into you don't give a flying fuck about Tyson. Now you just
Mhm.
are you're trying to prove something for yourself."
It really is, again, setting up for what I think Percy is supposed to be learning here, and it's just it's so interesting to see that his heart is almost split between the right place and the wrong place. He wants it almost seems like he wants it to be because he has to prove that the others are wrong, and over that course, it slowly morphs into, or do I just care about my own internal perspective and I just wanna be liked again? And
Yep.
again, for a 13-year-old, it's a really reasonable motivation and it
Mhm.
works really well.
Yeah. No, I have no complaints, and I don't take exception to that internal strife at all. I think it actually makes a lot of sense. Now, what doesn't make a lot of sense
Yep.
is the chariots all start lining up, and then even more of these shiny-eyed pigeons start gathering in the woods. And not only that, they are screeching so loudly that the campers in the stands are starting to take notice, and they are
Yep.
starting to glance nervously at the trees, which are now shivering under the weight of the bird. Connor, why the fuck is nobody doing anything?
I'm shrugging. I don't know, man. I've been complaining
This
about this
is
whole time.
I know even if I were a demigod, I would look at that as an omen of the fucking end times.
Yeah.
There are metal demon birds that are starting to screech in unison, growing in size and volume. And we're just like, "Huh, that's a little unnerving." Are you maybe you guys fucking deserve to get your bones picked clean by these things. Are you brain dead?
Yeah, man. I guess they are. Shit, like, fuck.
Yeah, no time for that.
Yeah.
Tantalus says, Charioteers, attend your mark. And the race starts.
And
Drops
the
his
race
hand.
starts. We're off.
Yep, the chariots roar to life, hooves thundering against the dirt, and the crowd immediately. I like to imagine they're all looking over their shoulders, and then the race starts and they just turn back around and go, Yay! They're putting their hands up. Like fucking baby with jingling keys level of distraction. Holy shit.
But the race does get off to an exciting start, at least. Percy says
Yeah.
almost immediately there was a loud, nasty crack. He looked back in time to see the Apollo chariot flip over. Well, there goes your horse in this race.
I
The
know.
Hermes chariot had rammed into it, maybe by mistake, maybe not. The riders are thrown free, and the Hermes team, Travis and Connor Stoll, are laughing at their own good luck, but not for long as the Apollo horses crash into theirs, and the Hermes chariot flips as well, leaving a pile of broken wood and 4 horses trampling away, kicking up dust. 2 chariots down in the first 20 feet. Percy exclaims, I love this sport. Sure, man.
I yeah. I mean, there's you gotta love a good blood sport.
I
And
get it.
I
You're having
I
fun.
I think that well, the Hermes cabin absolutely did that on purpose.
Oh,
And
yeah, definitely.
I believe they did that on purpose because they recognize what I recognize, which
The
is
true
Apollo
threat.
cabin would fucking win.
Yep.
Yes.
I like that. I will incorporate that to my personal headcanon of what is happening in this moment because I think, Jack, that makes too much sense.
I appreciate that. And I also appreciate this entire section, honestly.
It's pretty fun.
I I think similarly to how we did the Capture the Flag chapter, I don't wanna spend too much time going for beat, action by action, what happens. I would just recommend people read this section. It is very fun. I think this is some solid, quirky Percy Jackson camp Half-Blood action. It is well narrated. It shows people being creative and using their kind of specialty demigod powers to the best of their ability. It's very neat. I really don't have any complaints.
Yeah. I'll give a very brief summary. We're left with 4 horses in this race, pun intended. We've got the Hephaestus cabin, the Ares cabin, and way ahead you have the Athena cabin, led by Annabeth, and of course, Percy and Tyson. As Percy and Tyson try and deal with the Hephaestus chariot, the birds continue to get closer and closer until it is too much to handle. The pigeons are swarming. Thousands of them are dive bombing the spectators in the stands. They hear screaming off in the distance. Beckendorf is properly mobbed. There's no way he can even see where he's going, so he veers off the course. Ares' chariot just throws a net over themselves and keeps going. But at this point, Annabeth and Percy are like, all right, we should do something. There is literally no fucking reason not to. So Annabeth, having identified finally what these are, she goes, Stymphalian birds! They'll strip everyone to bones if we don't drive them away. And Percy says, Tyson, we're turning around. Going the wrong way? He asks. And it's like, yep, going the wrong way.
Yeah.
Although,
Well, Percy responds with always
I
as
was about to
he
say,
turns around, which is a pretty good little one-liner. All right, Percy, I'll give that to you. That was pretty cool.
it's fun. Annabeth finally rides up next to him, and now we're starting to see these 2 characters. They've been fighting all chapter, and I'm glad Rick doesn't drag it out for more than a chapter, because it would have gotten really irritating.
Yeah.
And of all the things I enjoyed in this chapter, when Annabeth rides up next to him and shouts out, Heroes! To arms! Dude, that sent shivers down my spine. I don't know why, but I really liked that.
Uh-huh.
It reminds me that they, when push comes to shove, they want to do the right thing.
Mhm.
And they want to be heroic. Percy says he wasn't sure if anyone could hear her over the screeching of the birds and the general chaos, but at least these 2 campers and Tyson are united once again. And Annabeth, she's where she needs to be. She's thinking quickly, she knows what they are, and Percy says, "Too many! How do we get rid of them?" And as Annabeth is stabbing at a pigeon with her knife, she says, "Hercules used noise, brass bells!" Good, we've got a plan.
Yeah.
And her eyes get wide. She says, "Percy, Chiron's collection." Percy says, "I understood instantly. You think it'll work?" And so they dart off toward the big house. And throughout all of this, Clarice is yelling at them, "You're running? The fight is here, cowards!" Of course, as she draws her sword and charges for the stands, having won the race first.
Yep. Yeah.
Because of fucking course
Congrats,
she did.
Clarice and Aries Cabin. She
Yep.
stuck with it, was so fucking in the zone, didn't realize that there were these swarm of metal birds all over the place, which, as a visual, Connor, are you aware of what passenger pigeons were?
No.
So, passenger pigeons are an extinct bird that I believe went extinct in the early 1900s. And they were at one point, if not one of the most common bird, like, in the world. There were
Wow.
so fucking many of them. If you want an actual visual representation of what the campers are dealing with right now, I would highly recommend people look up passenger pigeons. There are tons of illustrations and paintings of them literally blotting out the sky for minutes, if not hours at a time in their swarm. There were so many at one point that it could turn day into night for a disturbing period of time. They were considered borderline a pestilence when they showed up. And it is shocking that they were even able to be rendered extinct, but it is another sad case of humans saying, "Oh, well, these are infinite. We can do whatever the fuck we want with them." And basically just overhunted them. And then they all died. So all of these little creatures that used to be able to blot out the sun by their population, within the span of like 100 or 200 years within the Americas, they just got wiped out. So
Wow.
that's your
That
little Jack history fun fact, but also again for some visualization of how terrifying a swarm of birds could actually be and the sheer volume that the campers are probably dealing with. Passenger pigeons is what you're going to want to look at.
yeah. Holy shit.
Are you looking at them now?
Yes.
Dude, they're crazy. Like
Yeah,
it's
no,
sad
I
that
mean,
they're gone, but it is biblical plague level of terrifying.
that, I think, is pretty much what I'm picturing for this chapter. But the birds, as they are just swarming in, as you said, this biblical plague sense, which crazy that no one thought that was a problem before now.
Yeah.
Percy mentions that he's running down the hall of the big house now. He's looking for Chiron's apartment, and he sees his boombox is still on the nightstand, and so were his favorite CDs. He grabs, quote, the most repulsive one he could find. Annabeth snatches the boombox, and together they run outside. They see down at the track, chariots are in flames, wounded campers are running in every direction while birds shred their clothes and pull out their hair. Tantalus is yelling, "Everything's under control, not to worry." Annabeth and Percy pull up to the finish line. They pull out the boombox, and Percy presses play and starts up Chiron's favorite, the all-time greatest hits of Dean Martin, which we briefly discussed this beforehand. What a crazy stray going to Dean Martin.
I know. What the fuck? I mean, I never had an issue with Dean Martin. I guess I'm kind of a fan, but I listened to some of him after reading this chapter because it's described as suddenly the air was filled with violins and a bunch of guys moaning in Italian. I couldn't find what song specifically was being referenced, maybe Volare, but I don't know. I feel like Dean Martin's got pretty good music. I think Percy just hates Italians.
Yeah, man, I did the same thing. I prepared for today's episode. I was like, before we start recording, I'm just gonna put on some Dean Martin to like get in the spirit of things. And I was expecting to have it on for 5 minutes before I went, okay, I get it. I'm sick of this shit. And I left it on for like a solid 20 minutes
Yeah.
before you hopped on. I was properly enjoying it.
Mhm.
Look, it's not what I would casually listen to on an average day, but it's certainly not horrible. That's crazy.
I
Percy is
know.
absolutely throwing some of the most Percy and Annabeth and the birds. Why does everyone hate this?
I know. Well, it all comes back to Rick. Rick, I don't know what your fucking problem is with Dean Martin, but I need you to figure that out, okay? Because this is uncalled for. I
I
almost think,
wonder.
like, I wonder if it's because they're Italian, so it's like it's Roman.
See, that would be funny. I was gonna say, I wonder if Rick might actually be a fan of Dean Martin, because I feel
Mm.
like in many ways Chiron does embody Rick, and maybe like his
Uh,
kids hate Dean Martin,
uh-huh.
and so this is a little inside joke for him, perhaps.
I actually really fucking like that. I'm
That might
gonna
be it.
I'm gonna hope and now going forward assume that that is the case. Very funny if true. I actually really like
Yeah,
that.
I hope it is. But whatever the case, the demon pigeons also do not like Dean Martin. They
Mhm.
go nuts. They start flying in circles. They run into each other. And Annabeth, taking charge, says, "Now, archers!" And the next line says, "With clear targets, Apollo's archers had flawless aim. Most of them could knock 5 or 6 arrows at once." That's crazy. Within minutes, the ground was littered with dead, bronze-beaked pigeons. That's pretty sweet. I liked that
Yeah.
moment. That felt really cool.
Mhm. Yeah, once again, we get that inter-cabin collaboration. We get to
Mhm.
see what camp can do when they work together as opposed to compete with one another. And I really, really like that. I am not gonna belabor my points that I've already made. I just wish that that was leaned into a bit
More.
more
Mhm.
obviously.
And with that, Tantalus, the camp having been saved, no thanks to him, says, "Bravo! We have our first winner!" Walks to the finish line and gives golden laurels to Clarice before saying, "And now to punish the troublemakers who disrupted this race." Cause yeah, nobody dealt with the fucking demon birds beforehand.
I
It's
know.
fine.
Yeah, I am curious to see what the fuck he means by that. Or the next chapter is on the next page, and I willed myself to not look at what the immediate response to that is. I don't know what he means by disrupted. I am very curious to see what the justification is for that claim.
God, you're not gonna like it, but hey,
Okay.
we don't have to worry about that right now. Uh,
Mhm,
we can just talk about this chapter before we dive into some myths in a moment. On the whole, I think it has that problem of there are some really slow moments that are really dry, and those detract from the really good moments in my mind.
mhm,
I think you make a good point that it is trying to draw into that same sort of energy as Capture the Flag. And in a lot of ways, what really strikes me about this chapter is that when you read Capture the Flag, despite being very, very good, ends up almost being some of the most boring parts of the chapter. And all
mhm,
of the Camp Half-Blood you get that leads up to it is so filled with character and enriching the characters we've already met and adding to them that the whole thing feels like this well-flowing, interesting thing to read. Whereas here it's like, uh-huh, uh-huh. Oh, that was neat. Uh-huh. Oh, a
yeah,
chariot race. Oh, demon birds. And so it doesn't have the same pacing, honestly.
mhm, yeah, I agree. I think, honestly, from going and doing our summary of the chapter, I think I've warmed up to it a little bit just because
Mhm.
the parts that I did enjoy, I really, really did enjoy them.
Yeah.
I think that what would fix this chapter outside of what I am starting to see are some, systemic core problems that this book is probably going to have and not fix when it comes to the narrative, is just there's some frill and fluff that could have been cut out. I feel like, which is so weird to say, because I feel like whenever we talk about Camp Half-Blood, we're always usually the main complaint we have is that there's not more.
I mean, to go back to the moment that we both enjoyed where Percy is seeing the dryads and the satyrs trying to tend to Thalia's tree, what you specifically said would benefit that scene, and I agree, was something more. Dionysus or some extra campers or anything in that regard. I think the issue is that this chapter's moments of fluff, as you've been calling them, end up feeling a bit disparate from the rest of what's going on in the chapter and in the novel thus far. And so it's not that there needs to be less fluff, but that the fluff needs to be more relevant and purposeful than just Tantalus made camp worse.
Yeah.
Next.
Yeah, or even again, because I don't mind that. I wanna see how Tantalus is making camp worse. The issue that I'm having is that I wanna see more of how Tantalus is making camp worse, but a lot of the praise that I've given kind of leaning into that is from reading between the lines, and I'm a big fan of show don't tell. I like being able to intuit that stuff and pick up these little threads, but I feel like it's because I'm trying to give it the benefit of the doubt in good faith as opposed to that's actually the intent.
Mhm.
And there's a
Yeah,
difference.
I very much agree. Is there any other final thoughts on the chapter before we take a seat on the bleachers overlooking this fucking carnage and start on today's myths?
Let's just do it.
All right, I've got two. We're talking about winged creatures today.
Nice.
Pegasi and Stymphalian birds. So
Oh,
let's start
avian.
with Pegasi. So we've talked about Pegasus specifically in two other contexts, and they're two of the most major contexts in which Pegasus exists in Greek mythology. The first is, of course, Pegasus' birth at the slaying of Medusa, and the next is Pegasus' role in the story of Bellerophon the Blameless. Since we talked about Bellerophon in phenomenal detail, I recommend you check it
Mhm.
out. It's in our chapter 13-14 mega episode during our deep dive in the Lightning Thief, and I think it's unanimously one of our favorite myths from book one.
Oh, yeah. It's so good.
So go check that out if you haven't. But since we've already talked about that in such detail, I am going to very briefly recap the circumstances of Pegasus's birth. And I want to be clear here, we are not talking about Pegasi. We are talking about capital P Pegasus, the one and only.
Mhm. The proper noun.
Exactly. So according to the Theogony, when Perseus had cut off the head of Medusa, there sprang from her blood stout-hearted Chrysaor and the horse Pegasus, so named from the springs of Okeanos where he was born. And in Greek, springs would have been Pegai, so Pegasus is truly just creature that is born of the springs. Interestingly, while we are here, and because I don't think I pointed it out during our episode where we talked about Medusa in chapter 11, I noticed that the reason that Pegasus probably has wings is because Medusa was frequently depicted with wings, as were the other Gorgons in their original depictions. So I guess Pegasus got the wings from his mother and Poseidon's horse genes. Yeah, Poseidon's horse genes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly. But since we didn't meet Pegasus today, and instead the creatures that Tyson was so fascinated by are the descendants of Pegasus, let's talk about Pegasi. But of course, to talk about that, we have to first answer the question, are there other Pegasi in Greek mythology? And the answer is no, actually. There aren't.
Oh,
There are other examples of flying winged horses in Greek mythology, though they are not ever referred to as Pegasi or children of Pegasus. They're just unrelated other winged horses. So the other example that I could find is that the goddess Selene, goddess of the moon, is frequently depicted with winged white horses pulling her chariot across the night sky. I've actually included and linked one such surviving piece of ancient art so that you can see this art because it's not so much provided in written sources, so much as it is in the art we have of Selene. Similarly, her mirror Helios also has a chariot with which he was said to pull the sun across the sky, though notably, his horses are not depicted as having wings. The difference here could perhaps come from the fact that Selene has an epithet meaning long winged. So, as people went to make art of Selene, thinking of her as long winged Selene, they thought it was only appropriate that her horses also have long wings.
Hmm.
But that is the extent, excluding capital P Pegasus, of winged horses in Greek mythology.
Wow.
Right!
That's,
That was my
there's,
thought.
like, nothing.
Which is fascinating to me, because while winged horses may not all go by the name Pegasus, they seem pretty prevalent across cultures and even into the modern day. So, at risk of belaboring you with another list, let's briefly touch the surface on some of those other mythologies, as well as some other places in which Pegasi crop up, and see if we can't identify some patterns. So, firstly, let's actually get the broadest category out of the way. Modern uses of the Pegasus. There are so many of them. I'm not even going to
Mhm.
try and list the vast number that there are because they range from the mobile logo, a gas company, to their inclusions in modern works of fantasy like Harry Potter, to popular toy and media brands like My Little Pony or Barbie. Pegasi are kind of everywhere. And I would conjecture, and I should be clear, we are in speculation territory here, but I would conjecture that this pervasiveness in modern culture is very understandable. Flight as a concept is something humans are fascinated by. For millennia, humans flying has been something that we have fantasized about, dreamt of in many ways. Whether that's our modern tale of Superman or the ancient Greek myth of Icarus, humans want to fly.
Mhm.
So today, we imagine hoverboards, flying cars, kids dream of being a pilot as one of the jobs that is like, what do you want to be when you grow up? People want to fly. Well, in a world where horses and other similar beasts of burden are the main mode of transportation, it's suddenly very understandable why people might instead dream of flying horses,
Mhm.
especially when you start to consider that cars and these more modern methods of transportation have existed for no more than 100 to 200 years. Flying horses were the flying cars for many, many years. So let's talk some mythological flying horses, because I know that's what you're all here for. In Romanian folklore, there's a prince and hero named Fatfrumos who rides a winged horse called Alul Nazdravan, which apparently can just be loosely translated to magic horse. In Norse mythology, we have at least one example of a winged magic horse, Hrovarpnir, which is sometimes depicted as winged, and while Odin's eight-legged steed is never depicted as winged, Sleipnir does fly. So we have at least two more examples of flying horses in Norse mythology. In Chinese mythology, there's debate as to whether there are three types of winged horses or if they're all just actually one type of winged horses. But my favorite of them was the Longma, meaning dragon horse, described as winged, scaly horse dragon hybrid creatures with rainbow scales, which I thought was
Jesus.
really cool. Yeah. Nearby in Tibet, the Lungta, or wind horse, is said to carry prayers from humans to the heavens. And in Hindu mythology, Vishnu's final avatar, Kalki, is depicted as coming down from the heavens on a winged horse known as Devadatta. Finally, I have a myth from Iran where winged horses are said to carry souls, and sometimes gods would even take the form of winged horses themselves, lending further credence to the idea that winged horses are seen as divine. If humans dream of flight and winged horses are something that we cannot fathom any way to create, then they must exist as something the gods would have. And that is why, I think at least, winged horses are so prevalent and so frequently associated with the divine, gods, good fortune, etc.
Neat. I like that.
Yeah, but that's all I really have on Pegasi, since I was really surprised to find that they're not more prevalent in Greek myth, but that's mostly just capital P Pegasus.
Hmm. Very interesting. It reminds me a little bit of when you were talking about hellhounds. Just one
Mm-hmm.
of those creatures that has become so ubiquitous and part of just the human zeitgeist, even though its origins are quite basic. It still is able to help personify a certain yearning or desire or aspect of life that, yeah, it just makes sense that they'd stick around.
Exactly. And I know we're in the myth section, kind of not talking about the Percy Jackson side of things anymore, but I think that's why it also works so well in that universe. It's very understandable to be like, well, if there's one winged horse, certainly there would be more. These are
Mhm.
really important and useful things. Like, who wouldn't want a way to fly accessibly?
Right.
And I think that's, again, what also makes it so pervasive just across culture is it's very easy to imagine a horse with wings.
Mhm.
But going on to our second winged creature, I hope everyone is ready to talk about another labor of Heracles today, because we're talking about the Stymphalian birds. Now, we've talked about a couple of labors of Heracles at this time, so I will very briefly recap why Heracles is doing them. They were as a form of atonement for his sins in murdering his wife and child while under the influence and madness that Hera put upon him, at least in some versions. And to atone for those sins, he is forced or told that he must serve his cousin, King Eurystheus, for 12 years. The Stymphalian birds are the sixth labor in the series of mythological labors that Heracles has to perform. For this one, the task is genuinely simple and straightforward. Drive the Stymphalian birds away from the lake where they reside. Consider this version from Diodorus Siculus in the 1st century BC. It states, Heracles then received a command to drive the birds out of the Stymphalian lake, and he easily accomplished the labor by means of a device of art. The lake abounded, it would appear, with a multitude of birds without telling, which destroyed the fruits of the country round about. Now it was not possible to master the animals by force because of the exceptional multitude of them, and so the deed called for ingenuity in cleverly discovering some device. Consequently, he fashioned a bronze rattle, whereby he made a terrible noise and frightened the animals away, and furthermore, by maintaining a continual din, he forced them to abandon their siege of the place and cleansed the lake of them. And that's it. That is truly the story in its totality. There are
Wow.
subtle differences between versions, but that's most of it right there.
Huh. Now, it's funny that you say that it was so brief because this is one of those labors where I'm like, I have no memory of that. If it was ever told to me at one point, it just so negligible that I basically just wiped it from my memory. So it does not surprise me that there's very little of
Yeah.
substance there.
In most of the tales of the labors of Heracles, it takes up like at most a paragraph, which is very interesting. But I really enjoyed that and we'll get to what the birds actually look like according to some later authors, but while Rick's description does not really match from a visual perspective, I do love that he was able to bring in that it's this multitude of birds. It's the mass of them that is truly what makes them dangerous. And yet again, we see Percy taking on another labor of Heracles, which just sort of further aligns us with that idea of things. And I mentioned that there are some versions with subtle differences. Well, in the version from Pseudo Apollodorus, it's stated that Athena is the one who gives Heracles the noisemaker. The passage reads, Heracles was stumped by the problem of driving the birds out of the woods. But Athena got some bronze noisemakers from Hephaestus and gave them to him. And by shaking these from a mountain adjacent to the lake, he frightened the birds, not enduring the racket, They flew up in fear, and in this manner, Heracles reached them with his arrows. Which, again, just to draw the parallels, I thought was really cool. Annabeth here
Mhm.
being the one who recognizes they're Stymphalian birds, we need to drive them away with noise. And like Athena for Heracles, provides that solution so that Percy can actually get in there and solve the problem, though Annabeth gets a lot more of the glory in this chapter, and deservedly so. She deserves to get some every once in a while. So that is pretty much the whole story of Heracles and the Stymphalian birds, but I did mention I at least had some descriptions of what they look like. So Pausanias, the Greek geographer from the 2nd century AD, actually did take the time to write down a description of what he had been told the birds were like. He writes, "There is a story current about the water of Stymphalos, that at one time man-eating birds bred on it, which Heracles is said to have shot down. Pisander of Chimera, however, says that Heracles did not kill the birds, but drove them away with the noise of rattles. The Arabian desert breeds among other wild creatures, called Stymphalian, which are quite as savage against men as lions or leopards. These fly against those who come to hunt them, wounding and killing them with their beaks. All armor of bronze or iron that men wear is pierced by the birds. But if they weave a garment of thick cork, the beaks of the Stymphalian birds are caught in the cork garment, just as the wings of small birds stick in birdlime. These birds are of the size of a crane, and are like the ibis, but their beaks are more powerful, and not crooked like that of the ibis. So while Rick describes them as pigeon-like, it seems that Pausanias describes them as more crane-like in their appearance.
Hmm.
I also specifically chose to leave in the detail regarding the potential Arabian origin of these birds because of the location of this myth. The lake that Pausanias references, he almost certainly did go to in his travels, and in fact, you can still visit Lake Stymphalia in Greece today, the place where Heracles once visited as well. So, why did I leave this detail in about the Arabian origin? Because today, scientists have actually been able to study the surprisingly rich wildlife that lives in the lake and in the surrounding region. They've noted that Lake Stymphalian is apparently a very important step for migratory birds, meaning that over the course of a year, it's home to not just the birds that are native to the area, but many other birds that are not native to the area and won't be native to the area for any extended period of time, no more than a stopover. While I couldn't find any other sources from the time period speculating on the origin of the birds, that could be just because it wasn't important to the story at all. What the story did have as something important was why the birds needed to be killed. Well, in that passage from earlier, Diodorus Siculus did write the lake abounded, it would appear, with a multitude of birds without telling, which destroyed the fruits of the country round about. So we can see that even in other versions, the Stymphalian birds did appear suddenly as though migratory, and perhaps this migration seemed like an act of divine interference affecting the surrounding peoples as though some magical evil monster came down just to destroy their crops.
Huh.
So now that we've begun our discussion on where these creatures are from, we've clearly identified that they are from Lake Stymphalia. We can even go a little bit further, and we can perhaps identify who these birds belong to. Because according to some authors, they do belong to someone. The Roman writer Pseudo-Hyginus stated that Hercules killed with his arrows on the island of Mars the Stymphalian birds, which shoot their feathers out as arrows. That's a new detail.
Whoa. That's fucking cool, yeah.
So interestingly, these birds that are the progeny or owned by Mars are referenced in other stories. Or at least they might be, depending on whether or not you think that the Orniths Arioi, or birds of Ares, are the same or different than the Stymphalian birds. Unfortunately, we don't really have a way to know at this point. Scholars have debated, and the consensus just seems to be that it's hard to determine if these were once two stories that eventually became connected, and the Stymphalian birds and the birds of Ares became one, or if instead they diverged starting from one story and became two. Either way, we do have further works from Diodorus Siculus that at least imply that he thought the birds of Ares were the same as the Stymphalian birds. Consider this passage from Book 2 of the Argonautica. It says, "They passed them by and cleft their way with oars over against the island of Ares all day long. For at last, dusk, the light breeze left them. They spied above them, hunting through the air, one of the birds of Ares, which haunt that isle. It shook its wings down over the ship as she sped on, and sent against her a keen feather, and it fell on the left shoulder of goodly Oileus, as he dropped his oar from his hands at the sudden blow, and his comrades marveled at the sight of the winged bolt." Okay, so we've established they are birds of Ares, and they do shoot feathers. One of the men then goes on to say how he thinks they should be defeated and tells a little bit about the story of Heracles. He says, "The island of Ares is near us. You know it yourselves now that ye have seen these birds, but little will arrows avail us. I trow for landing, but let us contrive some other device to help us. If ye intend to land, bearing in mind the injunction of Phineus, for not even Heracles, when he came to Arcadia, could drive away with bow and arrow the birds that swarm on the Stymphalian lake. I saw it myself, but he shook in his hand a rattle of bronze, and made a loud clatter as he stood upon a lofty peak, and the birds fled far off, screeching in bewildered fear." So, at least one of the sailors on the Argo believes that these birds of Ares are the same ones that Heracles drove away from Lake Stymphalia, and thus they do go on to scare the birds off by banging their shields and spears to make as much noise as they could to safely reach the island. Which I also find fun because it does mean that, yet again, this book is drawing from not just the Odyssey as we identified earlier, but also the tale of Jason and the Argonauts, which is perhaps
Mhm.
why the Stymphalian birds appear in this book at all.
Huh. Neat.
But that is all I have on Stymphalian birds and Pegasi for today.
Wow.
Short as far as myths go, but this was a long chapter, so I think neither of us is complaining.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I like it when it naturally balances out that way. We got a really long chapter and some more succinct myths.
I really was surprised by the lack of other Pegasi in Greek mythology. It just feels like such a quintessential cornerstone of like what people would picture in their head. If you say Greek myth, I feel like they imagine Zeus with a thunderbolt and a Pegasus flying overhead. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh. Yeah, oh yeah, it's definitely one of the most iconic aspects of Greek myths in terms of, like, the monsters and the beasts. I am curious, at some point, are we going to do a dive into capital P Pegasus?
We most certainly are. I don't remember when Pegasus shows up, but Pegasus does at some point show up, not in this book, but in one of them.
Gotcha. I only ask
So,
because you kept mentioning that there's a lot more with capital P Pegasus, so now I'm curious about that.
there is, and we will most certainly get there. But everyone at home is going to have to keep on listening. So I guess if you want to eventually get to Pegasus, we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to support our content, please be sure to leave a review, share with your friends, and follow us on all your favorite podcast platforms. Until next time, this has been Notes from the Oracle. That was a fun one. I actually really enjoyed the Pegasi research for this one, despite
Oh,
it
that
being
was
like,
cool.
oh, wow, that's weird.
Yeah, I always enjoy when the myths kind of go out of the usual Greek mythological box and you start pulling from like, yeah, there's this from, India and this is from Japan and this is from Western Africa and seeing all the different kind of similarities and differences between the different cultures. I've always found that very cool as a concept.
Me too.
Almost
Mostly
like
because I just
convergent
don't.
myth telling.
Yeah, one, I love when we identify things and I'm like, holy shit, this isn't like a Greek myth thing. This is like a human thing.
Yeah. Mhm.
That's just a really cool feeling. But also, you know me, I like the myths. I really like being able to find those moments where it's like, I'm learning something new. I had no idea that, you know,
Uh-huh.
there was an extra winged horse in Chinese mythology that's also a dragon.
Yeah, no, like, that's fucking cool. It's a winged horse, and it's even cooler.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh
pretty
man,
sure
no.
there's I didn't have the information, like, right at my fingertips, so I didn't wanna say it and be wrong. But I'm also pretty sure that in Islamic mythos, there is, like, one of the steeds, or if not just, like, the steed of the Prophet Muhammad is a, like, winged horse, half donkey, half, like, mule thing that has wings and it has the face of a human. It's just
Oh,
like
weird.
it's got, like, the face of a guy, and it's, like, a mix of different types of horses, and then it's got big wings, and I think it's supposed to be, like, ridiculously fast. Like,
Huh.
it described as being like a fucking lightning bolt level fast. Maybe I'm wrong, this might have just been something I totally made up. But that if it is real, 1, I'm fucking sick with it. I have so much trivial knowledge. 2, another point in favor of people love the idea of, "Oh, well, these things help us traverse the land faster. Imagine if
Mhm.
they let us traverse the sky."
No, dude, exactly. One of the ones that I actually left out was another one from Chinese mythology where apparently there was an emperor from the Han dynasty who was obsessed with the idea of finding a heavenly horse, which were sometimes called blood-sweating horses
Oh, shit.
because they were, one, winged horses, but also supposed to be stupid fucking fast and could travel
Mhm.
very, very far. And he wanted to, like, you know, be able to go places very far. So he was like, I will spend all my resources to find blood-sweating horses.
That's fucking that's so cool. See, that's the kinda shit where if I were, like, an ancient ruler with just theoretically infinite amounts of wealth and manpower, I would absolutely get obsessed with something like that. I want the
Oh,
blood-sweating
man.
horse that flies really fast. I want the Holy Grail. I want the Tesseract. Just something like that. It's like, what if, you know? What if it is
Yeah.
real?
Oh, dude, I can so imagine you just being the guy who's like, "You there! Your job for the rest of your life is to hunt down winged horses that sweat blood. Go, move on."
And, you know, if you wanna make a map while you're doing it, that'd be great too, but mainly that horse thing.
What is this? Useful intellectual discovery? No, no, no.
Yeah.
Horses.
Like, I've mapped out the Red Sea, sir. That's a Eurasia? I don't give a damn about Eurasia. Give me my cool mount.
I must look so cool for the common folk.
Uh-huh, exactly.